Susan Dey's story is one of the most surprising and emotional journeys in Hollywood history, because behind her calm smile and soft voice was a quiet storm that shaped her entire life. Born on December 10, 1952, in the small city of Pekin, Illinois, Susan grew up in a simple home where money was tight, but love was present. Her father worked at the local newspaper, and her mother was a nurse who carried a warm spirit into every room she entered. When Susan was only 8 years old, everything changed. Her mother suddenly passed away from pneumonia, leaving the family in shock. This loss shaped Susan in ways she didn't understand at the time. She became more quiet, more thoughtful, and more protective of her feelings. Even as a child, she developed a habit of holding everything inside, choosing silence over sharing her pain. A year later, her father remarried, and her stepmother Gail noticed something special in Susan: her natural beauty, her posture, and her gentle presence. She encouraged her to try modeling, eventually sending photos to the Eileen Ford agency. To everyone's surprise, both Susan and her sister were signed. At just 15, Susan began appearing in magazines, ads, and small campaigns that introduced her face to the world. But modeling also introduced her to a harsh reality: constant judgments about her weight, her appearance, and her personality. Behind every photo shoot was pressure. She was told to look thinner, smile more, or change something about herself that she couldn't control. Those early experiences planted the first seeds of doubt and insecurity, long before she ever stepped onto a television set. Yet even with all that stress, Susan never complained. She pushed forward, following the idea that success would give her life meaning and stability. She hoped that if she worked hard enough, she could build a future far away from the pain of her childhood. Susan's life changed forever in 1969 when she landed an unexpected audition for a new television series called The Partridge Family. She had no acting experience, no formal training, and no idea what Hollywood truly demanded from young girls. More than 300 girls auditioned for the role of Laurie Partridge, but Susan's natural innocence, quiet beauty, and soft-spoken nature made her stand out. She was offered a 7-year contract and suddenly found herself flying to Los Angeles to begin filming. When The Partridge Family premiered in 1970, it instantly became a massive hit, pulling millions of viewers every week. Susan became America's sweetheart almost overnight. Teen magazines printed her face on every cover, and thousands of fan letters arrived each month. People loved Laurie Partridge, but very few people knew Susan. What fans didn't see was the pressure she faced behind the scenes. She was only 17, still figuring out who she was, and every move she made was monitored. Her team told her what to wear, how to speak, and how to appear in public. She was expected to stay perfect at all times. The stress took a serious toll on her body and her mind. Susan started skipping meals, and soon her entire diet consisted of carrots and water. Her weight dropped to 92 pounds, dangerously low for her 5'7" frame. Her skin even began to turn orange from the carrots. Worse, she was terrified of disappointing anyone, so she hid her struggles from the world. Even her co-stars noticed her exhaustion. Shirley Jones acted like a mother to her, helping her get quiet medical support when things became too dangerous to ignore. Still, Susan felt trapped inside an image she couldn't escape. While millions saw a beautiful, calm teenage star, inside she was fighting fear, hunger, loneliness, and a growing sense of being lost. It was during this time that her complicated feelings for co-star David Cassidy began to grow, eventually leading to heartbreak that would follow her for decades. As filming continued, Susan's emotional life became deeply tied to her experience on the show, especially because of her feelings for David Cassidy. Susan admired him, trusted him, and slowly developed love for him during their years working side by side. Everyone on set knew she had strong feelings, but she kept them private, protecting her heart from the public just as she did with everything else. One evening during a Hawaii shoot, she finally gathered the courage to tell David how she felt. He listened kindly but told her he did not feel the same way. For Susan, this moment broke something inside her. She had already been fighting an emotional battle, and this rejection added another wound she tried to hide behind her calm smile. After the Partridge Family ended in 1974, they met again at a reunion event and shared a night together. For Susan, it felt meaningful, like something real was finally starting. But months later, she learned that David had told friends he only did it out of pity. That betrayal crushed her. Even worse, in 1994 he published a memoir describing the moment publicly, portraying her in a way that humiliated her deeply. This was the final breaking point. Susan refused to talk to him again for the rest of her life. She also turned down every reunion request and walked away from the nostalgia that many fans adored. That heartbreak didn't just hurt, it made her close the door on a huge part of her past. Trauma from her childhood, pressure from her teen fame, and decades of silence collided, turning her into someone who guarded her privacy fiercely. She continued working, but the pain she carried became part of her performances. When she delivered emotional scenes on LA Law years later, critics praised her depth, not knowing she was drawing from wounds that never fully healed. She turned her heartbreak into art, but it never stopped hurting. Throughout the 1970s and early 1980s, Susan searched for roles that allowed her to escape the sweet girl image, choosing darker, more serious characters that helped her reclaim her identity. As Susan moved deeper into adulthood, she worked hard to break free from the image of Laurie Partridge. She wanted to be taken seriously as an actress, and she took on roles that challenged her emotionally and physically. In Mary Jane Harper Cried Last Night, 1977, she portrayed a deeply troubled mother involved in child abuse, a role that shocked fans who only knew her as a gentle TV daughter. The emotional depth she brought to the film proved she was far more talented than Hollywood had assumed. She later took bold steps to transform her career, including appearing in Playboy and participating in a nude scene in the film First Love. These choices were not about seeking attention but about reclaiming her identity from an industry that had defined her too narrowly for too long. Critics eventually recognized her courage, noting that she was willing to take creative risks that many former child stars avoided. Yet those brave decisions came with personal consequences. Susan was often judged harshly, and the pressure to maintain a perfect image never fully disappeared. Behind the scenes, she struggled quietly with alcohol, turning to it as a way to cope with years of emotional exhaustion. She eventually entered Alcoholics Anonymous and found sobriety in 1992. But even that private healing journey was interrupted when a tabloid infiltrated her recovery group and exposed her personal struggles to the world. That violation broke her trust in Hollywood and in the public eye. Still, she pushed forward, pouring her energy into meaningful roles until she accepted the one that would change her career forever. When LA Law ended in 1994, she felt the weight of burnout pulling her down. That same year, everything became worse when David Cassidy published his memoir describing their private night together. The betrayal reopened old wounds that Susan thought she had buried. At the same time, her private recovery from alcoholism had been exposed. It felt like everything she had kept close to her heart, every hurt, every struggle, had been dragged into the light against her will. She decided she could no longer live in a world where her personal life was treated like entertainment. She turned down major roles, refused interviews, and slowly withdrew from Hollywood. Her final acting work came in 2004 when she appeared in Third Watch. After that, she disappeared from the screen completely. But instead of fading away, Susan chose a different path, one focused on quiet service and meaningful work. She spent years supporting organizations that helped victims of sexual assault, drawing from her experiences playing strong women in courtrooms on LA Law. She gave her time to causes she believed in and helped younger actors privately. Fame no longer mattered to her. Peace did. She no longer needed applause or attention. What she needed was a life she could control, something she had never truly experienced during her years in the spotlight. By the time she reached her 70s, Susan Dey had created a life completely separate from Hollywood. She moved to a 25-acre farm in Andes, New York, a quiet and peaceful place surrounded by trees, fields, and fresh mountain air. She lived there with her husband, Bernard Safransky, whom she married in 1988. Their marriage stayed strong because it was built outside the glare of fame, giving them privacy and stability. Susan spent her days focusing on simple joys: gardening, caring for animals, writing letters, and staying close to her daughter, Sarah. She also continued mentoring a few young actors through quiet email exchanges, offering guidance without ever returning to the public eye. Her net worth remained comfortable at around $10 million, but she never lived like a celebrity. She wanted calm, not luxury; peace, not attention. She refused every reunion invitation related to the Partridge family. Not because she resented her past, but because she had outgrown it and needed to protect her emotional peace. The pain connected to that period, her eating disorder, the pressure, the betrayal, the public exposure, was too deep to revisit. Instead of looking back, she chose to look forward, building a life filled with nature, privacy, and healing. Susan's transformation from a teen idol to a reclusive, grounded woman shows how powerful it can be to walk away from the spotlight. She had given Hollywood everything she had: her youth, her health, her emotions, and now she had finally taken her life back. Even though she no longer appears in movies or interviews, her legacy continues quietly. Fans still remember her as Laurie Partridge, but many also admire her strength in stepping away from fame to protect her well-being. In a world where many celebrities cling to the spotlight, Susan showed that true happiness sometimes lives in silence, far away from flashing cameras and public judgment. Today, when people hear Susan Dey's name, they usually remember the girl with long brown hair and shy eyes from the Partridge Family or the strong lawyer from LA Law. But the real story of Susan Dey is much deeper and more emotional than any character she ever played. She survived childhood loss, the pressures of early fame, a dangerous eating disorder, heartbreaking rejection, public humiliation, and the invasive nature of fame. Yet she kept moving forward. She built a successful career, earned major awards, and proved that she was a powerful and gifted actress. More importantly, she learned to choose herself. Susan's life reminds us that fame is not always glamorous. Sometimes it hides pain, insecurity, and pressure that most people never see. Her decision to leave Hollywood was not an escape, it was an act of courage. By stepping away, she protected her heart, her health, and her spirit. At 72, Susan has found something far more valuable than fame: peace. She spends her days surrounded by nature instead of cameras, talking to a small circle of trusted people instead of crowds, and choosing quiet moments over red carpets. Many fans wish she would return to acting, but Susan seems fully content living a life where she controls her story. After decades of feeling watched, judged, or misunderstood, she finally writes the script of her own life. And in a way, this chapter, her peaceful life on her farm, is her greatest victory. Even though she will never return to Hollywood, she remains one of the most unforgettable stars of her generation, and her story continues to touch people who learn what she went through. Her journey is emotional, inspiring, and at times heartbreaking, but it reveals a woman who carried more strength than anyone knew. Try not to cry when you see what happened to Susan Dey at 72, not because her life ended sadly, but because she finally found the quiet, healing life she deserved all along. As Susan moved into the later years of her life, she began to understand something very important about her past: that she had spent most of her youth trying to please everyone except herself. Hollywood had trained her to stay quiet, look perfect, smile for the camera, and hide anything that made her human. For decades she had followed that rule without even thinking about it. But as she grew older, she realized that this was not a healthy way to live. She had spent years pretending that her old wounds no longer hurt, even though they still lived quietly inside her. She finally started giving herself permission to feel things again: sadness, frustration, fear, disappointment, and even anger about everything she had gone through. This emotional honesty was new for her, and at first it felt uncomfortable, but slowly it became a kind of healing. She also started seeing that she did not need Hollywood's approval to have value. She did not need applause or attention to know who she was. The world had known her as a perfect teen idol, but she now preferred being something else: a private, peaceful woman who controlled her own story. In this period, she spent more time reading, walking, traveling, and connecting with people who knew her long before she became famous. She kept her circle small because she had learned that too many people took more than they gave. After so many years of pressure, she enjoyed simple days filled with ordinary joys, a quiet breakfast, time outdoors, and long conversations with the few people she trusted.